From WAMU 88.5 at American University in Washington, welcome to the Politics Hour starring Tom Sherwood. I'm Kojo Nandi. Tom Sherwood is our resident analyst. He's a contributing writer for Washington City paper. Tom Sherwood, welcome.
Good afternoon.
Later in the broadcast, we'll be talking with Matt Ferranti, who is an Arlington County board member, who's a new Arlington County board member. And joining us in studio now is Isaiah, or Ike Leggett, who is the former county executive for Montgomery County. Ike Leggett, good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Former.
Former. If you have questions or comments for Ike Leggett, call now, 800-433-8850, or send email to kojo@wamu.org. You can send us a tweet at Kojo Show or go to our website, kojoshow.org. Watch the live video stream of this broadcast and ask a question or make a comment there. Before we get the questions directly for Ike Leggett, Tom Sherwood, let's talk a little bit about Mayor Bowser's plan to reduce opioid deaths in the District of Columbia by half by late 2020. It's a 22-page report titled Live Long D.C., Washington, D.C. Strategic Plan to Reduce Opioid Use, Misuse, and Related Deaths. It is a very ambitious plan, reminding me a little bit of Washington's Vision Zero plan to end traffic fatalities by 2020.
Well, there's nothing that a government doesn't do better than to come up with a plan. And certainly the mayor's no different than any other government in the country. Charles Allen, the Ward 6 council member, said this is kind of unrealistic to think you can have this opioid crisis that's dogging the entire nation and say, okay, we'll get rid of it within the next 2 years, 2019 and 2020. But at least it's an acknowledgement from the criticism that the city has had a sporadic, not very well organized assault on people who have drug addiction problems. You know, back when we had the crack cocaine thing, the idea was just to lock all the people up. Now there's more an effort to get people into treatment. But it's also the aging of an epidemic. A lot of the people who are dying are older people who have been using drugs for many decades. It's a very serious thing. It's good that the mayor spoke directly to it.
And you have had experience with this kind of thing, Ike Leggett, because the opioid crisis is a nationwide crisis, and I'm sure you've experienced it also in Montgomery County.
Certainly, and certainly throughout the entire state of Maryland, we've had a great deal of challenges as it relates to it. I want to commend Lieutenant Governor Boyd Rutherford, who over the years had organized a task force and worked in Maryland to try to resolve some of the challenges. But even with that, we continue to have ongoing problems and challenges, not only in Montgomery County, throughout the state of Maryland. It is a nationwide problem.
And to have treatment available is the main, whatever counseling you can give people, or whatever the issues are, you have to have the antidote, the drugs available to help people.
Certainly, there's a comprehensive way to approach this, but treatment certainly is helpful, but it requires a great deal of help and support across the board in order to address a very, very serious problem.
And Maryland Governor Hogan is trying to take steps to make sure that the Washington Redskins football team remains in Maryland, remains in Prince George's County, as a matter of fact, but at a different location known as Oxon Cove. He is pushing that. The people who live in that neighborhood don't seem to think very highly of it, and environmentalists, as I said, residents are angry about the potential loss of this park. It includes historical exhibits and the working farm. This according to a report in the Washington Post by Rachel Chasen. But he's going ahead with it, and everybody in this jurisdiction, the District of Columbia and Virginia, are all trying to land a home for this team.
Well, some of the political leaders are, but people who are going to be affected by a stadium of this type are not happy. Whether you're talking about Potomac Yards in Virginia, when the team first tried to go back there, when Doug Wilder was governor of Virginia. That's why they ended up going to that spot of land there in Prince George's County. The team wants a new stadium. The stadium it has is too big, it's not accessible, and so they're trying to find a place to move. Whether or not they'll move back to the District of Columbia, where Mayor Bowser openly wants them to return, or whether they'll go to Oxon Cove. But this is a $3 billion business. Whether you like the team name or hate the team name, whether you're disgusted by the owner of the team
and the president of the team.
Yes, well, this is a multi-billion-dollar business, and to bring it to that part of the county where the casino is and the redevelopment of all that area could make sense. But you shouldn't criticize people. They don't want to give up a 500-acre. I apologize for my allergy today. I sound funny. I hope I don't sound any funnier than normal. But you don't want to give up all that land. But the governor says, we want to keep this business, not a team, we want to keep this business in Maryland.
But Leggett, invariably there are people who say we want to give away too much to these already very wealthy owners of teams because, as Tom Sherwood said, it seems to be good for business, but there are others who say it's really not worth it.
Well, first of all, Tom is right that people who are in close proximity, almost in any jurisdiction anywhere in the entire country, are going to object. But oftentimes you have to look at the overall business objective and try to pair that with some of the environmental and traffic challenges that are in the area. I think those are workable. I don't believe that you pursue this simply because you want a team. You pursue this because it makes good sense for the entire public overall, to make good business sense. And I think the location, at least on paper, makes sense, but you have to work through some of the intermediate details that people are complaining about.
We should be clear. There's one thing that's kind of misunderstanding. There's a feeling that some people are saying, well, the team has to move by 2027 when its current lease in Prince George's County is up.
They can renew that lease.
That is simply not true. I don't even know where that came from. The team wants to move because Dan Snyder, the aforementioned owner, wants a new stadium. He wants something in the more 60, 65,000 range. He wants a dome stadium so that he could perhaps host a Super Bowl. He wants to be in an area where he can have more development around it. You can't just have a big stadium with parking spaces around it. So he's working very hard. He just is not doing a very good job in his own public relations of anybody really wanting Dan Snyder to come to their neighborhood.
That starts with the name, by the way.
Exactly.
And the name. I mean, the name is, the D.C. Council, David Grasso, the council member here, most recently got the entire council to say, look, we will entertain this idea if you change the name and if you don't expect us to pay for the stadium. And that's been the city's position for a decade or more.
On now to the federal government shutdown. Earlier this week, we put out a call to local federal employees to let us know how the partial government shutdown is affecting them. Here are a couple of the responses we got. One employee said, although the furlough was conducted in an orderly manner, there is something crazy about being employed but unable to work. In my mind, it happened fast. I really don't like the uncertainty. Where else can a commander-in-chief get rid of his staff in short notice right before Christmas and simply not pay them? This is my concern. How can I continue to work for an employer who brags about not wanting to pay me? It's very unsatisfying. An employee of ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement writes, I, like many of my colleagues in my office, joined our agency because of its role in combating transnational crime, not because of some desire to remove so-called undesirables. These past 2 years, it feels like on the one hand, our agency has taken an extreme direction, which has knowingly gone along with the administration's misleading of the public concerning immigration and border issues, and on the other, I feel like we take a disproportionate amount of blame for the immigration mess. In some ways, it's a nice break to be away from the storm, even if it is without pay. That said, crime doesn't stop because the government does. Leggett, Montgomery County has a large number of federal employees, as does the rest of this region. You were county executive during the course of a number of these government shutdowns. What do you think about this one, and what role can a county government play during a shutdown?
I think that we need to ensure that people fully understand the importance of the federal sector in not only Montgomery County but throughout the entire region. You mentioned a couple of specific incidents as it relates to federal workers, but there's also ancillary impacts as well. The restaurants, the bars, the transit and travel agencies around, all are impacted by this decision. I think people do not recognize and accept the importance of the federal workers until there's a crisis, until there's a problem. And we need to move beyond that because these are very important jobs. They're relevant to our society, but also relevant to our economy, and to make the kinds of decisions that are being made at the national level without those considerations. So we need to continue to press our federal agencies, our federal representatives, to make sure that they carry that message forward to ensure that we get open as quickly as possible.
D.C. Mayor Muriel has written a letter to the president asking him to bring a rapid end to this shutdown. He has, as far as I know, he has not responded.
Well, I shouldn't. I would bet he probably hasn't even seen the letter, and if he did see it, I doubt that it's 2 or 3 paragraphs, so it might be too long for him to read it. But she said in that letter, there are no winners when it comes to a shutdown, and here's a national thing. But as the former county executive was saying, the people who are working in the small carryouts, or who are tipped workers, or who are cab drivers who don't get the customer, they're not going to be reimbursed at the end of this big political battle. The contract workers who do lots of things, there are millions of jobs and millions of people who will not be reimbursed once this battle between the president and the Congress is over.
Our guest is Ike Leggett, the former county executive of Montgomery County. If you have questions or comments for Ike Leggett, you can start calling now, 800-433-8850. Tom Sherwood, what are you burning to ask Ike Leggett?
Why is he here? He's a has-been.
He's here because we invited him.
I look at that as not as has-been, but liberation.
Well, do you still live in Burtonsville?
I certainly do.
I said, okay, the last couple of days, I said, I'm going to go back and look over your career. Even though it took too long, I didn't even get through half of it.
He's had a long
I went
career.
back and I listened to a 2008 program with you and Kojo before I was gracing this program. You talked about the things you were trying to do. You'd just been elected in 2006 and took office in 2007, I guess. You were worried about the economy, you were worried about schools, and you were worried about traffic, and you were worried about public safety. On your way out the door, you worry about schools, you worry about traffic, public safety, and development. And it made me think, with all the controversies that you've had in your time in office, both as a council member and as county executive for 3 terms, you don't solve these problems, you manage them. Is that right?
You manage them for the better and for a period of time with the foundation that you assume that those who follow you will carry through on that and make things even better. Yes.
You had the financial crisis of 2007, 8, and 9. You had another one. You had to raise taxes in 2016. You've just had to do a lot of things to keep the county moving.
And you have called the county's financial management your proudest accomplishment as county
executive. Let's go back and look at where I started. When I came in, the county budget had increased by 40% over the 4 prior years before I assumed office. We were down to about right around $100 million in financial reserve. When I left, we are now at $500 million in financial reserves, and our reserves are up at 9.4% as compared to 2.1%. We built or constructed 77,000 affordable housing units. We've added 23,000 classroom seats. Our traffic situation has improved, but as you've said, you have not gotten to the position where those things are totally solved. But I think if you go back and look at a recent editorial in the Washington Post and all that has been written in the last few weeks, we've had market improvement on virtually everything that you've just described. And crime is down considerably in the county overall.
But in terms of reducing the size of the government, in terms of actual jobs,
we
cut $1 billion or so out of the budget?
We cut anticipated challenges for the county, $3.7 billion over that 12-year period. The county government in terms of size is down about 10%, 1,253 positions. So we're markedly, on any kind of objective standard you look at, we're much better. And the current county executive, the current council will say we're in a much better position than we were when I took office.
You were slow to endorse Mark Elridge for county executive. What do you say to him, having given all those years?
No, I wasn't slow to.
No.
You talk about being jealous.
Oh, being jealous. Well, actually, that's the other issue in the party. That's right. I'm sorry. Being jealous, you were slow to endorse because you had a good working relationship with Governor Hogan.
Not only that, we had some difference on some issues that I think he and I ultimately worked through. So it's a combination.
Going forward? Mark Elrich has a lot of people thought he might be too liberal and come in and tear up the place. He's reappointed several of your department heads. He's reached out across the county. What is he doing right? What is he doing wrong as he steps into your job?
Well, first of all, I endorsed him right away. I believe that Mark, having worked in the county for a number of years, understand the issues, the challenges we face. He's a very intelligent person, and I think that people have labeled him too fast, that he's too aggressive, too progressive, anti-development. And I think most of those things are not true, and you have to give him an opportunity. I think he started on the right direction, and I'm very hopeful that given the county council, given the concerns that have been expressed, and given his willingness to work with all the people that you just described, that we're going to see a very, very good and productive tenure as county executive for Mark.
What advice would you give to him and other future county executives about how you balance the concerns of the business community and labor in Montgomery County?
Well, the thing that you have to keep in mind that you have to listen to all the people and be responsive to everyone across the board, even those who disagree with you. Secondly, you have to recognize also that finance, money, and budgetary management is in fact very, very important, because there are creative ideas out there, there's a great deal of innovation, but at some point in time, you're going to need resources. Maintaining a AAA bond rated, understanding and having sustainable budgets going forth a long period of time, I think is helpful. Also keep in mind that when you look at Montgomery County, we're not an entity in and of itself. This is not the state of Montgomery County. We are part of the state of Maryland, and you have to work with the governor, you have to work with all of the legislators across the board in order to ensure that the county residents are not being taken advantage of, and you can resolve some of the overall challenges that we have. Transportation, education, all of those challenges must be dealt with as it relates to a really good relationship with the state of Maryland.
I think one of the things that's changed a great deal from the time you first decided to run for the council is social media. No Twitter, no Facebook, no Instagram, no emails. I mean, back then you had to make a phone call.
No, he had beepers.
and beepers. And beepers. But now people are in touch with their government and county leaders on an hour-to-hour basis. I tell people in the news business, we don't have a 24-hour news cycle. We have a 24-second news cycle. How has social media changed the ability of you to both be in touch with constituents and also not be overwhelmed by constituents?
Well, you could easily be overwhelmed because people want responses and want them done instantly. And when you have to make major decisions, it's not quite that easy. And secondly, when you have people that you don't see, you don't have an opportunity to look in the eyes, talk about the challenges, it becomes a little bit more difficult. But one of the things that I did, and Mark is continuing to do, is to reach out. I was probably the most accessible county executive in the history of our county. Town hall meetings, forums, budget challenges, all of those things, I went directly to the people and talked to them, all of the people across the board. And so if you maintain that level of contact, you're going to be in a position to make better decisions. They're not going to be perfect, but people understand them and appreciate them. But you're correct that it has changed, and you have to make adjustments accordingly.
And also the change in the media, Gaithersburg Gazette disappeared.
Yep. The Journal.
But then you also have Bethesda Beat and some other more online news organizations, Maryland Matters and some other things that deal with state issues. How has the change other than Kojo getting much older, how has media changed in terms of how you behave and what reporters call you up and want to know what's going on?
Well, one of the things that we've faced is that many of the institutions that you've just described are new, and we see it far too often, quick turnover. To have reporters who have been on the beat for long periods of time, who understand the issues at a local level, I think is crucially important, regardless of the mediums which you're going to media that you're going to utilize. Not having that, and you have the constant quick turnover, and to me, does not serve the public as well as it should. And so, whatever institution you're looking at, you need to have people who are paid appropriately, who are going to stay and maintain those positions for a period of time in order to serve the public much better.
Here is Susie in Rockville, Maryland. Susie, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm calling from Rockville to applaud the leadership of County Executive Leggett for leading the county to be one of the first 4 communities in the nation to end homelessness for veterans, and we're on the verge of ending homelessness for people who experience chronic homelessness, who have disabilities, long-term histories of homelessness, and we'll be announcing an initiative this summer to end family homelessness. We could not have accomplished this without the county executive's leadership, and his experience as a veteran really was key in our ability to make this grand accomplishment.
Ike Leggett, is that an accomplishment you're proud of and you take credit for?
I think it's a combination of things. The county council, along with Coalition for Homelessness in Montgomery County, many other organizations, our Veterans Commission, all working to achieve this particular objective. We've had a great deal of success as it relates to veterans, but as Susan has just indicated, we still have some challenges that are out there, and it's an ongoing challenge, and we have to continue to work, contribute, and to make sure that our elected leaders are going to be as responsive to this challenge.
Susie, thank you very much for your call. Connie on our website commented, I worked for Montgomery County for a number of years in the now disbanded Department of Economic Development. I almost fell out of my chair last month when I read in a front-page article in the Washington Post that my former supervisor pled guilty to embezzling $6.7 million in county funds. Clearly, a lack of internal financial controls enabled this to take place over a 6-year period. How is this being remedied, and what responsibilities are senior officials taking?
Well, we all take responsibility for it, even though it's at a much lower level within the old Department of Economic Development. We cannot deny that. And there are some system procedures that have been in place for the county going back for a number of years that we instituted many years ago. There are a whole list of changes that would be too long to list to avoid this kind of a challenge in the future. The IG report, as well as the report from the state's attorney and many others, have outlined ways in which we can easily prevent this. But the challenge here is, I think, it was a lack of oversight, a lack of accountability that allowed a very clever, a very well-known and likable person to take advantage of a system and was able to utilize it over a number of years.
I know. I forgot to. We can't show these on TV, but on the
YouTube.
YouTube.
This is somewhat. This is when my photograph was actually on the literature. But there's a story that goes back when I first ran for office. There was no photograph of me in the campaign literature. We ran for 6 months without a photograph of Ike Leggett actually being on the.
What are you wondering? What happened to the big afro on his
Well, that's quite the change. Maybe we'll put this up on the Kojo website.
I had one of those too.
But you don't have one without the photograph. That's the one that you do.
No, I give you that to Kojo, and you can put that up on the website later, and people can take a look at it.
I wanted to go to schools, but you wanted to deal with another.
I was just going to do a little more personal. This is like the end of the year, the old man when
Exit
Father
interview?
time is leaving. I want to know what you're going to do. You've got what are you going to be doing in your time? Are you going to go back and teach?
No, I do not want to teach. I'm retiring, and that means that for the time being, at least for another year and a half or so, I will travel, do some research, I hope to do some writing, and take time to reflect on many of the things that I've done over the years, but I'm not interested in hard, fast work at this point.
You're going to travel to a little town in Texas where you were born, or
well,
Louisiana?
I never lived in Texas.
You've been in Louisiana, but
yes.
You're going to go down there, or you're going to go worldwide on us?
Both. I'm heading to Australia, New Zealand next month for about a month or so. I just returned from Mexico.
Just a personal trip, and for not business, not
no,
tax,
not business,
not a tax deductible trip.
No.
How many job offers have you turned down?
Too many. And as I said before, I'm not interested in working, and hopefully I can maintain this presence for at least another year and a half.
Well, let's talk about schools. There are a number of firsts for the new Montgomery County School Board. It is 100% women, headed by an African-American woman, and is majority people of color. How significant is that?
I think it is significant. That's an achievement, but one I think that we need to take a step back on. When you look at our school system today, one of the things that is lacking, male presence, especially at the elementary school. I love all of the women that are on there, terrific public servants, but I would love to have had some males on that board, because that's a huge, huge challenge for us not to have that level of presence, because fathers, involvement in the school system, involvement in the PTA, involvement in the Board of Education, I think is essential for our overall community. So I would love to have seen some male presence.
Do you think that's a factor in the achievement gap? How do you think the school system
No, I don't think
can
that's
address
a factor in the achievement gap. There's a combination of things in that. the societal challenges we have when you have kids who are being reared by one parent, you have kids who are not in appropriate housing, all the other social elements that hit that, and then you expect that between the hours of 8 and 4 in the afternoon, that for the school system to resolve all of that. It's not something that is easily resolved. Clearly, there are some financial and monetary problems that we need to address as it relates to the school system, but overall, the achievement gap will not be solved solely by the challenges we have within the school system, but our entire community working collectively on a variety and host of other issues.
The state, you were the chair of the state Maryland Democratic Party in the 80s? When? I can't remember now.
2002.
2000. God, it seems like it was longer ago than that. Maya Rocky Moore Cummings was on the show a week or so ago. The issue of women and the issue of African Americans or just minorities, statewide politics, continues to be a blind spot. There's just nobody getting elected statewide.
Right.
What do you see going forward as a former party chair, and what can be done to make certain that the Maryland Democratic Party 2-to-1 advantage in registration looks more like the people in the Democratic Party than just the white guys who have the jobs?
Well, first of all, let me thank Kathleen Matthews, who I think did a terrific job. We were elected people across the board, record turnouts, huge amounts of monies. The only thing that didn't happen was the governorship, but she did a very good job. And that's a difficult job, especially when you do not have the governorship and you're serving as party chair.
Several good county executives.
Right. Several county executives maintained virtually where we were in the state Senate, even increased the numbers in the state House. So she did a terrific job. I anticipate that there will be a plan to move forward to address the governorship, because if you look across the board, Democrats did very well. I'm not sure whether or not there's a combination of how we message, how we present the candidates that we've offered for governor, and also keep in mind that we're running against a very popular governor and had a huge amount of money, had distanced himself from Donald Trump, and worked very well with the local communities, and he was going to be very difficult to beat under any circumstances. People need to recognize that was going to be a very difficult task. And you look at the numbers, for example, even in Montgomery County, the governor did 44%. With exception of Montgomery County, Baltimore City, Prince George's County, and very narrow win in Charles County, the Republicans won, the Republican governorship won everywhere across the board. And we simply cannot afford, especially in the areas around the Baltimore suburbs, Anne Arundel County, Harford County, Howard County, Baltimore County, we were just simply wiped out in those areas. And we need to have candidates that are going to appeal across the board for all of those residents, especially in those sectors.
In that election, Ben Jealous, many people said was too progressive, that the Democratic Party got ahead of the people of Maryland, and that he was too progressive. This is kind of the fight we're already seeing nationally with the Democrats as they get ready for 2020. The state party turned down Rashawn Baker, the kind of establishment candidate that you endorsed for governor, and went with Ben Jealous, who had a more progressive platform, but just didn't sell it as well. And now the Democrats, as you look to 2020, with whether President Trump runs again or not, that we're already hearing, are we going to have more progressive, younger people involved, or is it going to, the party?
We got about 2 minutes left.
So then answer the question. How is the National Party doing?
I think the National Party is doing very well under Tom Perez's leadership.
You can't just have Trump all the time.
But we are going to solve the problem that you've just described. I think that we'll have a candidate that will appeal across the board, because I think people are more interested in making sure we have policies that are going to work, and that they recognize the challenges of who's in the White House today, and that will override the differences, which are not as great as people have described them, among the various candidates that are running for president. I'm convinced that we're going to be on the right accord this time.
And finally, here's Catherine in Tacoma Park. Catherine, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Kojo, and hi, Ike, and hi, Tom.
Hi.
I wanted to clarify that a lot of people in the press have been saying that the federal employees will be reimbursed after the shutdown. That is not at all certain. It requires an act of Congress and agreement by the president before that, so that would be a separate bill that would need to go through. And so I think there's a lot of uncertainty for employees, not only when they'll be able to go back to work, but whether they will be reimbursed.
Well, that's true, but I think in the past there's always been a reimbursement for the federal workers themselves. But
it requires an act of Congress,
right,
and acceptance by the president.
And then there's this. A former federal employee wrote in response to our request, I recently took a new job in the NGO world, but my previous position with an NGO was a partner position with the USDA. Most people do not realize that although a furloughed federal employee will often get back pay, partners with the federal government do not.
Right.
We are forced to take paid time off if we want to be paid, and most of the time are not reimbursed. This was one reason I left. This past year's repeated threats of shutdowns was overwhelming. I am glad to be free of it. But there are a whole lot of other people who are not.
There are real people suffering real losses because of this artificial debate in the national government.
Well, I'm afraid we're just about out of time for this segment. Ike Leggett, I'm going to put off the rocking chair that I was having mailed to your home because apparently...
Mail it to Australia.
You're going to be out and about for a while before you relax in that rocking chair. Thank you very much for joining us, and frankly, thank you.
Congratulations on your 20th year.
And thank you for your service over all these years. All right. Ike Leggett is the former executive of Montgomery County. Coming up, Matt Ferranti. He is an Arlington County board member. Tom Sherwood is our resident analyst. Tom Sherwood, proposed laws here in the District of Columbia and in Virginia. Ideas under consideration by the D.C. Attorney General and ideas under consideration in Virginia would not exempt confidential conversations such as confessionals in church for any mandatory reporters, possibly including those, as I said, that occur in the Catholic Church confessional. Virginia has a slightly narrower proposal, but this proposal will be meeting with some pushback from churches here.
Well, I don't know how much pushback there will be because even the Catholic Church now is finally making more moves about abuse within the Catholic Church. And the local governments and state governments are also waking up to this. Several times in the past year, we've had stories with Carl Racine, the Attorney General, here on this show, saying that he was going to look into this as a possible violation of the church's nonprofit status and all these other things. And I think we're reaching a tipping point now, maybe we've reached it, where this is not just going to fade away and in a couple of months we'll be thinking about something else. The church has got to address it. And in this case, even in the District of Columbia, anyone 18 years or older is by law required to report sex abuse or child abuse if they see it. Now, that's obviously not done on a regular basis. But the Attorney General says maybe even the confessional, if someone goes within the confession booth and says something about child abuse, the priest has an obligation to report it. That could be very controversial given the privacy of that booth.
And because there's a similar proposal in Virginia, I'd like to ask Matt Ferranti what he thinks about it. Thank you so much for joining us. Congratulations.
Thank you for having me here. I'm glad to be here.
I have mangled your name several times. Pronounce your last name for me properly.
Ferranti.
Matt Ferranti is an Arlington County board member who is a new board member. What do you think about this issue?
Well, it's not one that has come before me in the last month or two. I do think that the ongoing stories regarding the Catholic Church are very troubling and have been for a number of years. But I also think that there is a privacy and a confidentiality issue there with respect to confessions. So that's one that I have to do a little bit more looking into. I do think that's an issue that in Virginia, of course, the state legislature would be the entity that would focus on that.
If you have comments or questions for Matt Ferranti, give us a call, 800-433-8850. Send us a tweet at Kojo Show or email to kojo@wamu.org. You can go to our website, kojoshow.org, watch the live video stream of this broadcast. If you live in Arlington County, see what your new county board member looks like. You unseated independent incumbent John Vistad, who was the first non-Democrat on the Arlington County Board in 15 years. Many people saw him as an independent voice on a very blue council. Do you think anything gets lost when the council only has members of one party?
I think the benefits of multiple parties are really about the results that you can get for the citizens of Arlington County. Any entity, you don't want civility just exclusively for its own sake. You want it because it can lead to better results. And what I argued over the course of the campaign was that the key issues that we needed to focus on were both our office vacancy rate and also affordable housing and some of the equity issues that I think are on a lot of Arlingtonians' minds at the moment with the continued changes that are happening to the county.
Glad you mentioned that. Before it was announced that Amazon would be coming to Crystal City, you said, quoting here, there needs to be a clear net benefit to the community from the incentives that would be offered, and stress the need to create a plan for the housing, education, and transportation issues raised by such a large operation coming here. Now that the plan is in motion and Arlington is set to pay, up to my understanding, about $51 million in incentives over the next 15 years, how do you feel the county is faring in this deal?
Well, on the whole, I think that the ideas that have been put forward, it looks like a very good opportunity for Arlington by the standards that you just articulated that I mentioned a number of times during the campaign. I do think that the incentive that we are focused on of the $51 million, $23 million is in the transient occupancy tax, the hotel tax, and its future revenues only if Amazon meets certain office leasing standards and leases a large amount of feet of office space in Crystal City and Pentagon City. So that's the second point. And the third point I'd say is that I do think the devil is going to be in the details. We have the broad focus on that hotel tax. The second piece of what you mentioned in the $51 million is for actually not to Amazon. It's for improvements that will go to transportation infrastructure in that area. So I think we've got the makings and the outline and the sort of key ideas for a good deal, but the devil is in the details of the actual eventual contract that we sign with Amazon and that we agree to with the state. So there'll be a robust process on that.
Have you seen confidential information about the agreement with Amazon that the public has not seen?
I have not. I've had a number of discussions in preparation for actually stepping into the seat on January 2nd as our first meeting. But I've had those discussions. I've seen probably taken a longer look than many at a couple of the draft agreement between the state and Amazon, and there's a 2-page letter that's also public that I've taken a long look at. So I've looked in detail at those and had good conversations, but nothing confidential that others.
The Post had a very good story this morning, and I can't remember the reporter's name. Patricia? Anyway, the reporter said, well, Arlington is moving into this agreement with Amazon. It could ask for more. It could question how much money it's going to put up. It could put in inducements maybe for Amazon to do more for the county rather than just turning the county over to Amazon. Where are you on that?
I believe it probably was Pat Sullivan.
Pat Sullivan.
Yeah.
I've known Pat for 20 years. Couldn't think of her name.
No worries.
She's calling you right now, actually.
That's right.
So actually, I think many of us in the campaign, I had been more forward-leaning, even with the standards that you mentioned, Kojo. I'd been more forward-leaning on Amazon than my competitor. But I do think that we need to be, as we saw on December 17th, there was a public forum, and Arlington residents want us to be strong in asking for everything that we can get with respect to affordable housing, renewable energy, and energy efficiency. And even though Virginia law does not allow for any requirement with respect to project labor agreements, I do think it's important. It's a community value, and it's an opportunity.
Just let's be clear, project labor agreement is where a government makes an agreement with organized labor to do certain projects. They're done in the city, but they're not done in Virginia.
That's correct.
Right.
Although one slight caveat, I think, in this case, the agreement would have to be between either the owner of the land, JBG, right, and as it builds construction. So it would be a private agreement because of the way things are structured in Virginia.
But if you have called to speak with Matt Ferranti, stay on the line. I will get to your calls. Just a couple of more questions. Housing affordability, a major concern across the region. Amazon coming to Crystal City obviously has many residents concerned that housing is only going to get more expensive. You've said you will work on this issue with, quoting here, creativity and relentless commitment. But what does that mean? How are you planning to ensure that Arlington County can grow economically without becoming unaffordable for long-term residents?
Well, specifically, ensuring that it becomes affordable for everyone in Arlington is a high bar. I think what Arlingtonians want from their leadership is a focus on every day working on this and thinking of new tools. So the incoming county board chair, likely incoming county board chair, Kristen Dorsey, has talked about shifts and changes to zoning that could be helpful. I think there's an accessory dwelling ordinance that might be helpful. I also think that there's changes. We have a housing conservation and preservation ordinance that could be helpful. With respect to creativity and relentlessness, creativity, in Richmond they have a community land trust that I think could be helpful. We're going to have to explore ways to get the capital for a building that could lead to what's called a shared equity approach to housing. And then with respect to relentlessness, I think that the zoning shifts are possibilities, and I like the two concrete examples I just mentioned, but I also think we have an affordable housing investment fund, and making sure that our budget seeks to provide as much as we possibly can in funding for that revolving loan fund is what I mean by relentlessness.
Would that be working around the edges or going to the heart of the matter? Because I've talked to any number of people, whether it's in Montgomery County or the District of Columbia or Arlington, Alexandria. Economic forces move much faster than government does. And then while you can talk about the various proposals to try to preserve affordable housing, people are telling us the prices of rental apartments in Crystal City already are going up. And that the economic force is going to be a tsunami-style force over Crystal City and Arlington County that the government would just simply not be able to keep up.
Well, I think that somewhere between working around the edges and the deep and significant, what I'd say, structural change that we will need to address housing affordability is where I think we can end up. I don't. Are
we talking about affordability in terms of middle-income people, or working poor, or no-income people? Arlington is already a very expensive place.
He has said specifically, I think he referred to a couple of groups, teachers. You want to be able to, people who are teachers, people who are involved in security work, I guess you mentioned?
First responders.
First responders.
Sure.
First responders.
So they would have some right to affordable housing?
I think he was using them as an example.
That's right. I don't think a right is the market is a huge force. And, my parents' generation, they wanted to move out, many to Fairfax and Prince William. And there's now a desire to live in close. We have excellent schools in Arlington. So I do think that the market is a challenge. But last night I came back in town after a week, and I talked to someone whose children currently live in Adams Morgan, would like to move out to Arlington, teacher and someone who works at Metro, and that's just a stretch too far for them. And so we should do everything we can to work for the middle class, but we also have to acknowledge that most of those who are at 60% of AMI and a little below the middle class, they're working and they're trying to get into the middle class. So I think it's both, in answer to your question, Tom.
Here is Mike in Arlington. Mike, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Yes, hi. I had some, concerns. What development is happening now on Columbia Pike? It seemed like there was going to be a lot of development, and then the trolley was axed, and nothing seems to have happened. And in general, it just seems as though Arlington's development strategy is to develop exclusively around metro stations, which excludes most of southern Arlington.
Sure. So I think you ask an important question, Mike. I don't think what I said throughout, I think that as a community we made a decision with respect to the streetcar and the trolley, but I do think we've seen a need for additional work. There's a form-based code that is the zoning code that applies to Columbia Pike. There's been some successes, but there is a need to make sure that we invest in economic development. I am one who is strong progressive in a lot of issues. I do feel as though economic development is one where you need to be thoughtful about your incentives, just as we were with the Amazon proposal. It's future revenue and it's targeted, much more limited in New York and the other 19 jurisdictions. But I do think that additional resources and thought and energy into economic development along Columbia Pike is badly needed. And foot traffic is, for example, during the day on Columbia Pike is a critical need.
Thank you very much for your call, Mike. Here's another Mike, this time in Falls Church. Mike in Falls Church, your turn.
Hi, I had two questions. The first, you started off with the Catholic reporting requirement, and I just want to suggest that it's not just First Amendment or privacy issues. Oh, it is First Amendment to the extent that Religious Freedom Restoration Act, I think confession is a sacrament amongst Catholics, and
that's why this is so controversial.
Yeah, it seems like a big lift to get around that. But with regards to Arlington and Amazon, look, I pass through Arlington every day. I take 29 into D.C. as part of my commute now that 66 is shut down and I can't sneak on that highway anymore without, paying the toll. What kind of traffic studies are being done to accommodate Amazon, and what kind of changes should we expect?
So the public process looking at each of the individual buildings that might develop Arlington has a history of planning, and each individual building would have to come for a site plan review. So at that time there would be traffic impact analysis. We're at a much earlier stage where there are a couple of buildings that are being rebuilt, where there's already ownership of those buildings. So 400 employees next year, 800 the following year. So it's a ramp up, and traffic won't be an immediate huge concern as a result of Amazon employees. It is important to note that the metro ridership at the metro stations in Crystal City is way down from 1986 and 2001 respectively. There's been a decrease in ridership, and that's because base realignment, a lot of federal employees left. So there will be traffic studies. You've asked a reasonable question. One of the strengths of the deal, in my view, as it is currently constructed, is that a lot of the resources are going to items that were already in Arlington's plan, a second exit to the Crystal City Metro. That's going to be now funded through this Amazon initiative that wouldn't have been funded previously. And so I actually think that on transportation and traffic, we're in a relatively good space because there's some capacity on the blue and yellow lines that we can use. That doesn't mean that traffic shouldn't be carefully analyzed, and that doesn't mean that we have to think carefully about the neighborhoods that are real close and the traffic impacts there.
The fact is, traffic is probably going to get worse, but you're going to try to minimize it as much as possible.
Yeah, I think that's well, I guess I would say this. I think that we've lost about 25,000 jobs since 2006 in the Crystal City area. So there's been a significant decrease relative to where it is now. There probably will be some additional traffic, but I think the vast majority of folks are going to use Metro. Not all, certainly, but the vast majority of folks are going to use Metro. And then we also are going to need to invest wisely in traffic and transportation.
Well, you've got Amazon. Do you want the Washington football team? Officials in D.C., Maryland, and Virginia all making moves to build a new stadium for the Washington Redskins. You're an advocate for Native American education, and the team has faced pushback, both for its name and for its logo. So what do you think of the multi-jurisdictional fight to host the team?
Well, we're 26 square miles in Arlington. We are in desperate need of land for additional facilities. I ran saying we have to reduce the office vacancy rate so that we can build the school capacity we need to educate every child well, and that requires additional land. So I know there are a number of jurisdictions that are engaged. I do think if you look at the history of sports stadiums, that's an investment that is not, and the types of incentives that is not always proven to be positive. On a separate basis, in my day job, I do work for Native American students. I appreciate you're not using the team name. I grew up here, so I understand that name. But of all the sports mascots, this is one name that is not appropriate. It's materially very different, in my view, from the Braves or the Chiefs or other names. So that's a separate issue from the narrow decision that Arlington would have. I haven't heard much in the way of discussion.
Well, Arlington, there's no room in Arlington. The only place in Northern Virginia is Loudoun County. And then, of course, Oxon Cove we talked about in Prince George's County, and the RFK site in the District of Columbia. The name is a huge impediment. So that's no doubt about that. I think that's important. But it is a major business. It does employ people. I mean, there are some advantages to having a major business come to a jurisdiction. But would you say that the name is a
non-starter?
Yeah, non-starter.
No, I don't think.
You have 1 minute left.
The name is not a non-starter. It's the issue that you identified, the lack of land in Arlington.
And no one's going to put it in Arlington, I assure you of that. Let me ask you very quickly, all this Amazon stuff, there's lots of discussion. Kojo had a forum in the county. When will there be a vote? Is there a date certain that you guys are going to take a vote on the Arlington board where people should be paying attention right now?
The earliest date would be February 23rd that this would come before us, but there's no guarantee as to the precise day. I do think it's important to have a robust process and to engage now so that we have this. We advocate for Arlington values applying to this opportunity.
Okay.
And I'm afraid that's about all the time we have. Matt Ferranti is an Arlington County Board member. First meeting coming up in January. Thank you so much for joining us, and good luck to you.
Thank you, Kojo, and thank you, Tom.
The Politics Hour is produced by Mark Gunnery. Next week, ring in the new year with special programming on WAMU. Our show returns Wednesday when we'll be discussing the local response to abuse scandals in the Catholic Church, including a proposal that could require clergy to report child abuse and neglect even when disclosed in the confessional. And a new book rebrands the Anacostia the River of Redemption. We'll hear from the authors on their creative approach to preserving the flora, the fauna, and the people who live in the Anacostia watershed. And until then, Happy New Year to all, and a special Happy New Year to our visitors in studio today, the Fairwerda family, Sarah, Uella, Sophia, and Noah. Happy New Year to all of you. Tom Sherwood, Happy New Year.
Happy and safe New Year.
And Matt Differenti, Happy New Year to you also. Thank you all for listening. I'm Kojo Nnamdi.